Good morning, everyone. Aloha. I think we've got a thank you. I did that without needing a response, but aloha. Aloha. Thank you. We're getting there. I'm delighted this morning to chair the first session. If we can get some more people into the room, it'll be better. But the first session of the second day, or in my terms, the third day, since I always include Sunday sessions, I'm afraid. So the second or the third day, depending on what you prefer. We've got two excellent speakers, two excellent panelists today. You've heard over the past couple of days about expanding and reaching network capacity. But where is the content piece in all of this? And how does the interaction between content and networks actually work? What's the tension on the network fabric? What's the demand on the content involved? Well, our panelists are really well equipped to answer that. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Eric Klinker from Resilio Inc. and Dave Temkin from Netflix to join me on the stage. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Take a seat. Right, let's get started. It's only a short session, as you will have read in the program. But here we have Eric Klinker, who is CEO and co-founder of Resilio, which itself uses technology that was developed in an earlier era for a pretty well-known entity. Netflix, Dave's Netflix needs no introduction, but the tremendous growth in video on demand, tremendous growth on downloads, binge watching, on an international level, it clearly creates some big issues for networks. So I'd like you both to tell us just what are your preoccupations, what's the big picture for you, Eric, and what's the big picture for you, Dave, in your business?
Yeah, sure. So I'll kick it off. Resilio Inc., as you can read in the bio, was recently spun out of BitTorrent Inc., where I was the CEO for better part of 8 years, and obviously saw a lot of growth on the network during that time period as video really became the killer app on the network, and I think continues to this day to be so. Resilio has a very different focus, and we are entirely devoted to the enterprise and carrier markets and commercial applications for that very same key resilient technology that is the core BitTorrent protocol, which we have the rights to coming out of BitTorrent. For the linguists in the room, Resilio is the Latin origin of the word resilience, and for the enterprise, we're kind of that missing ingredient that allows them to move really large amounts of data at scale in particular, and oftentimes over legacy or less than the best networks in the world, which is pretty key for a lot of emerging markets in Asia and other parts. So we feel that this is a pretty big opportunity to allow carriers in particular to do less with existing legacy infrastructure and yet still deliver on the promise of the network for modern applications, from smart cities to an enterprise that wants to scale DevOps distributions to thousands and thousands of servers over dozens of data centers. So lots of applications for this core technology in delivering this kind of missing ingredient resilience on the network.
Dave, where's the big picture for Netflix?
At this point, I think the big picture is what many probably people in the room have seen, which is getting into producing just phenomenal content. Our CEO likes to say moments of joy, right? So when people, and moments of truth for that matter, so when people decide, hey, I've got 5 minutes to kill, or I've got 50 minutes to kill, or I've got an afternoon to kill, it's a rainy night, or kids are in bed and I've got an hour before I want to go to bed, what am I going to do with that hour? And so what we seek to do is clearly to be the people who you engage with during that hour. And so myself and my team really want to make sure that that delivery experience is just a phenomenal time when you choose to engage with Netflix. We have grown significantly, right around this time last year when we were here, we were just talking about our global launch where we were expanding beyond just the limited territories that we were operating in then to basically everywhere around the world. And since then, we've continued to grow significantly. I've talked with some of you in the room about how best to deliver Netflix traffic. It's certainly been a challenge for us to figure out the global landscape, and hugely interesting to me on a daily basis.
Just following up on that point with you, we were talking earlier on, it's, as an avid user myself, avid watcher myself, it's always surprised me that your network and your company can cope with such huge demand and unpredictable demand. And when you're launching something, the user isn't really interested in the network.
Right.
The company is interested in the network in the sense of it's delivering the content which is being paid for, but which is back in the chain. How chaotic, how unpredictable is something like a launch of a major Netflix drama where you're hitting people with 12 episodes or you're hitting people with 20 episodes and there's a huge fanfare and there's a huge launch weekend? How does that work out?
Sure. There's a lot of people at the company who assume it's just going to work. And I think that in general, we've proven that we can make it kind of just work. There's a lot that goes on behind that. If you look at when we did a series launch in the US 4 or 5 years ago, there'd be this giant hump of traffic that was not there the day before. And generally that would mean that we would deploy capacity early. Eventually we would grow into that, assuming we kept a business plan. And so it wasn't like we were building capacity that we were then going to tear down. But as we continue to win more of those moments of truth, as people sit down and watch Netflix, it turns out that people are, instead of watching some Scandinavian drama that they're just getting into, decide that, well, we launched House of Cards today, so instead I'm going to go sit down and watch House of Cards instead. That's not necessarily the same in every market, though. In certain markets, people are very interested in international dramas and very not interested in comedy and so on and so forth. And so we do definitely see those ebbs and flows where a bunch of people will come in to watch a series and then maybe it'll calm down a little bit afterwards until the next big launch. But we've worked with network providers around the world and our own infrastructure to make sure that we've built far enough ahead. One of the great things about our system is that we know. So we've got, I've got a giant spreadsheet that shows me every content launch for the next 18 plus months. And so I can use that, align a forecast, and not only build my own infrastructure, but work with my network partners to make sure that they've got enough capacity in place.
I guess we're talking about very big traffic streams. What's the biggest demand on the network recently? What's been the biggest hit, that's taking you off the scale? Or I tend to think of everything in terms of, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, with Chevy Chase putting the Christmas lights up and the local power station having to upgrade its capacity. That's the impression I get with big demand. But
yeah, we've never had someone go out and have to flip the switch to turn on another nuclear reactor or anything. But we certainly do, to the point I made earlier, we certainly do have this great forecasting system that can tell us, hey, we need to make sure we've got that infrastructure out there. And lots of great stuff recently. The OA, some of you may have seen Stranger Things, 3%, which was a surprising show that traveled quite well. So we produced that in Brazil for the Brazilian market, but we made it available globally with subtitles and dubbed language in certain markets. And it's just been a breakout hit. Myself as a native English speaker, I find it hard to watch things that are subtitled, but it's truly captivating in a way that the cinematography is just so beautiful that you can watch that and more or less tolerate or even enjoy having subtitles.
Eric, looking at another side of the picture in terms of what you're doing, basing stuff on what's turned out to be a remarkably robust BitTorrent protocol suite, where are you going with that? I mean, do you require really robust networks these days? I mean, I get the impression you're kind of going back to demanding file transfers with multiple sources, multiple applications, and multiple endpoints. So how does that play out? How does network quality play out? Do you need network quality?
I think it's a great question, and it's probably answered, for the internet historians in the room, long before it was a company, BitTorrent was really the first viable, resilient enough technology to deliver video on the internet as it existed in 2001. And now at that same time, and probably for many years later, the only network capable of delivering Netflix was the post office. And YouTube, even its 300 kilobit version, YouTube didn't exist for another 3 years. BitTorrent could deliver video back then, and I think that proves its ability to eke out the resources, find unused capacity, avoid congestion, find the best path between any two endpoints. There are thousands of options. The client-server model is two-dimensional thinking, but peer-to-peer represents this sort of n-dimensional opportunity. There are many ways to get data from A to B, and Resilio is perfect at doing that. It finds the capacity in the network. Oftentimes it's underutilized. It's capacity that's sitting idle in an enterprise. It's probably capacity sitting idle in your network. We have the ability to capture that and turn it into useful product, useful capacity to deliver an application that probably otherwise couldn't be delivered on the legacy network as it exists today. So there are countless opportunities for that. I mean, in many parts of the world, the network is the network. It's getting better. It will get better. But instead of waiting for the next G, you can use whatever G you're on and still get the job done. So we think there's tremendous potential in this, and it's probably something that's only going to get worse. If you think about Moore's law operating at the edge of the network and the devices on the network getting exponentially more powerful year over year, and this is relentless. It's been going on for years. The internet that I was introduced to as a student in the 80s was a world dominated by a handful of mainframe computers. PCs came later. Pretty soon I have a supercomputer in my pocket, 3 decades on. That relentless drive is continuing, but it's also obvious to anybody in this room that infrastructure obeys a different set of laws. They're not playing by the same rules. In many ways, infrastructure is a fugitive from this law. And that impedance mismatch, if you will, between the capacity that the edge of the network demands and what the infrastructure as it's currently built out can deliver, I think that's going to continue to place a high premium on efficient use of the network for the foreseeable future. And fortunately, that's the opportunity we're focused on, allowing carriers and enterprises to get more out of the network they already have and deliver the applications that their consumers demand today, not tomorrow.
You had actually, you mentioned to me, you had a brush with geopolitical developments, should we say, over the past 2 or 3 years, but in a sense, they've kind of provided a highlighting line on what's going on. Could you comment on that?
Well, I think, BitTorrent and politics, I'm a tech guy. I want to stay out of these policy debates as much as possible, but occasionally there are some fortuitous accidents, and when we were launching a product, this is back inside BitTorrent, that later became Resilio, called BitTorrent Sync. It's just a very simple, consumer-driven file sync and share application. You might think of it like a cloud-free version of Dropbox. We launched this product a couple months before another guy by the name of Edward Snowden came out with some very interesting news and drove a whole new debate around data sovereignty and keeping control over your data, which played perfectly into our hands. It wasn't timed, obviously, but fortuitous marketing event for this product. I think today, even now, our number 2 commercial market, where we do the most business, is Germany, and this is a area where these issues are of high concern. So, I think power at the edge of the network. It's always a bit of a yin and yang, from the cloud to the edge, back to the cloud, back to the edge, centralized versus decentralized. This balance of power will continue and swing back and forth, over probably a period of decades. But there's room for both, and it's issues like that highlight it.
You mentioned that you have equally that more prosaic, but actually more business-orientated aspects, such as supplying fast food chains. There are actually quite demanding commercial needs out there where people have to update overnight, where you have thousands of locations, you have POS machines, and everything has to be put up to scratch overnight. I mean, are those the sort of commercial applications you'll be pursuing in the future?
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing in demand today. And even just rewinding the tape a little further than that, what gave us the inspiration for this opportunity, again, going back to the BitTorrent days, were all these hyperscalers, names you know, Facebook, Twitter, Etsy, ServiceNow, anybody that had massive amounts of infrastructure needing to flash upgrade tens of thousands of servers, and that would take maybe hours, maybe days. They all rolled their own version using BitTorrent, and they reduced it to seconds. And just the ability to overcome the hyperscale nature really spoke to the power of what the technology could do. And this has then since translated into opportunities not just with maybe a web hosting provider or an up-and-coming CDN who wants to do the same thing, but the number of endpoints can also be broken down differently, and maybe it's only 20 machines across 1,000 different locations. We have 2 of the top 3 fast food chains globally. They are all sitting behind DSL lines. Networks aren't the best. How do you move a 10 gig image into an environment like that? And they've all used the product, and the very next day they call us and to a word say, I've never seen anything that fast. And that speaks, again, we think, to the power and the opportunity.
But there's a network aspect there where we're heading into an era of smart cities, smart communities, where, if anything, the ambition has overreached the capability, and it's the hyperscaling aspect, which I think is quite critical here, because you can play into that, or your approaches can play into that multi-point to multi-point approaches.
Yep.
And where maybe the focus has been on capacity, it's been on fiber, it's been on 5G in this new era as a sort of automatic solution. In fact, what is required is this multi-point to multi-point hyperscaling attitude, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think, break it on down, right? This could easily describe 1 million sensors in a smart city deployment. I am told there are 100 smart cities currently being deployed in India. They're not going to be on 5G. They're not going to be on 4G. They'll probably start on 3G. And again, a technology like this can allow you to, eke out the requisite capacity in those environments to deploy that smart city, years ahead of when you otherwise might. So again, a lot of potential, we think, for any number of scaling opportunities.
Dave, I still can't get the image of Chevy Chase out of my head, so you'll have to bear with me. Is it an arms race? Are you having to make constant upgrades? We've been through the CDN type of initiation, backwards and forwards with ISPs and whatever. This is a very fluid environment. I mean, are you just having to keep on plugging away at it?
It's okay if you use the Chevy Chase image. It's actually one of my favorite movies, so I'm okay with that. We're constantly deploying capacity, but it's really a yin and yang of a system in that we've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy, a lot of headcount on also optimizing the video streams that we deliver. It's interesting, when we talk with the network partner, they'll say to us, oh, well, if we connect our network to yours, you're just going to flood it, you're just going to send as much data as possible, and you're going to abuse the fact that you've got this unencumbered pipe into our network. And then we say, if you look at the history of how Netflix is delivering content, if you look at our 1080 HD encode, it is a quarter of the size now of what it was when we started delivering content over the top. And it's only continued to get smaller. And it's because we continually invest in better encoding technologies for the content, so that it's not that we're not continuing to grow and not continuing to need additional network capacity, but at the same time, it's not one-to-one, right? We don't necessarily, if you trended it time over time, it's not one customer adds this percentage to the amount of bandwidth. We are looking at ways, our 4K encode, for example, is less than 20 megabits per second. A raw 4K encode is something like 8 gigabits per second, I believe.
250 gigs an hour, I think.
Yeah, it's an insane amount of traffic for a raw 4K encode, and yet we're able to reduce that down to less than 20 megabits per second. We recently changed our encoding scheme to be variable within content, which those of you in the room who've worked on networks for a long time and even video know that VBR has always been a thing. But VBR has not really been a thing that has been applied directly to video, where you might, for a scene, pull a bunch of bits out because it's mostly black on the screen and it's just almost no action, like a night scene, and then it suddenly goes into an action scene and you need to be variable within that. Generally, that's been done in very, very large chunks, i.e., minutes to hours of variability. In our case, we're sampling it every few seconds and changing that. So while it's been a challenge to continue to scale because we have led a lot of the scale in the internet, I think we've also led a lot of the innovation to make sure that we can do that responsibly. And we've also submitted a lot of that technology back into standards bodies so that other people can use that technology for the good of the internet.
I get the impression you're reasonably comfortable with the 8K era. Is that, I would have asked that question, but it seems to me that you're talking about just gigantic amounts of traffic, even however you reduce them, but you seem to be pretty comfortable with the emerging era.
Yeah, obviously 4K is really hitting its stride now. HDR has been huge. So I would say that HDR has had a bigger uptake and a quicker uptake than 4K did, for sure. So we're definitely seeing a lot of interest in HDR. 8K will definitely be a thing, and when it is a thing, we will be ready for it. One thing that I've been working on along with the rest of the company is that as we've moved into an area where we're producing our own content, we've actually built our own studio facilities on our new campus that we just opened in Hollywood. And so that has really changed the dynamic. Right before it was, oh, okay, this corporate office needs some connectivity to the internet because they need to be able to get to, Google Apps, or what are we supposed to call it now, G Suite, and AWS. And now it's, also this campus is processing raw 8K video, and they need to be able to store it, and they need to get it out, and they need to get it in, and they need to post-process and pre-process and do audio and so on and so forth. And so now we're even building corporate networks to deal with this raw data, which is not a surprise if, for someone who works for Sony or Paramount or someone like that, but for us, it's definitely a changing paradigm.
Eric, is there an arms race going on? It seems that BitTorrent has been incredibly persistent and robust, and it's been there where nothing else has been there, and it's been, if anything, it's had this enormous longevity. What's going to be happening in the near term?
Well, yeah, I think it's anybody's guess, right? But there's no doubt it's a bit of an outlier in the fact that it, as a technology, it's continued to stay relevant for, now approaching 17 years. That doesn't happen very often, and I know all of my investors back at BitTorrent would look at me a little bit shocked and it's like, why are you still here? We don't understand. Now I think technology has come along. Netflix has certainly made a huge dent, as I've long argued it would. Whenever you make content more readily available, more readily accessible, and more easily consumable, that's going to be a very good thing for the content industry. And I think Netflix, to its credit, has proven that thesis again and again. They need to be in more markets, not fewer, if the content industry understands where things are moving. But even so, there are many parts of the world where BitTorrent remains a very dedicated following. I think Brazil and India, two of our fastest growing markets. Again, if the data hasn't changed since I've left in April. But BitTorrent, I think, will continue to live on until somebody builds a better mousetrap that is able to better move this big data over unreliable networks. Video is going to continue to be large, compression aside, which is astounding. These are still big files, and in many parts of the world, the capacity of even the cheapest endpoint is vastly more than the intervening network is able to deliver. So again, that impedance mismatch is going to be with us for a while, especially as we look to connect the next 3 billion people to the internet, something everybody in this room is a part of, which is amazing.
Yeah. I would just add, and Brazil is a huge market for us as well. Brazil has been, there was just an article in, say it was Time or some other major publication about Netflix in Brazil. It's been astounding, the growth that we've seen in that market, a phenomenal market for us. And those kinds of emerging markets are going to be huge over the next few years, and figuring out how to get video into those markets. Brazil has surprised us because we looked at Brazil as a highly unreliable infrastructure, and at the end of the day, if you're willing to invest in getting to the right places in Brazil, it can be a very reliable infrastructure, and there is good quality broadband. But it's a huge country. As an American, it's easy to just brush off Brazil, and then you realize Brazil is basically the same square mileage as the United States. And many companies will go to deploy infrastructure in Brazil, and they'll stick a POP in Sao Paulo and go, oh, well, Brazil is solved. And you realize that would be like me saying, oh, well, I'm going to stick a POP in Chicago, and I've solved the whole of the US. It's not really a surprise that Netflix, the name is Netflix, right? Even from its inception, the idea was we're going to figure out how to get data delivered over the internet. DVDs were just, to your point, they were an interim step, and they were a very successful
and in your defense, you've been a far more successful commercial entity. So, BitTorrent, technically, I think it's its due, but as a business.
DVDs were an avenue. I mean, they funded our digital expansion, and the next coming years are going to be the real test of how do we scale this network.
What would you both like to see infrastructure providers, and I'm thinking satellite, but I'm thinking particularly submarine cable, I'm thinking data center, what would you like to see them do that they're not currently doing or not doing to the extent? Or is the industry more compliant? Is the community more compliant?
I'm really excited. There was the SpaceX launch, was that last Thursday or Friday, I think, where they launched 10 satellites for the Iridium constellation, which I think at the end is supposed to be hundreds of satellites. And so I'm really excited about the potential future there, because they're taking what is home consumer broadband deployment today in areas where it's not easily possible to serve them over wireline or fixed wireless services, and taking that from, oh, well, here's a 2 megabit or 3 megabit connection that's highly capped, to here's a roughly broadband equivalent connection over satellite. And so while I wish that it started 5 years ago, and it did, I mean, the development of satellites takes decades, the idea that you're now going to be able to go up and launch a dozen satellites at a time and really make that deployment process that much quicker is hugely exciting to me. We've seen over the past couple of years a increase in deployment of interconnect to networks towards the edge, and that has been huge. So that saves the broadband networks that are delivering capacity to users, hundreds of millions to billions of dollars a year by making CapEx investments ahead of time. They can save significantly on their OpEx. I think that they should continue to do that. Delivering traffic from the US to finally deliver in Europe is silly from a content provider perspective, especially if you're not doing live traffic. And it's silly to be delivering from Denver to get to Idaho, right? You should figure out ways to get that closer. And so that to me is really what's important, more so than, I don't buy a lot of submarine capacity, for example. I buy almost none. And I don't plan on buying more. So I don't really care whether or not submarine gets significantly better. What I do care about is making sure that the end user pipes continue to grow and continue to have unfettered access.
Eric,
I think,
what's your feeling?
Yes, I would agree with Dave. Satellite connectivity, I think, is incredibly promising. I grew up on a farm, and even today, the prospect of me getting internet connectivity to the place where I grew up is, this is in the United States. It's not a proposition. It's not going to happen. So, something like that I think is encouraging. A lot of our customers are in the transportation industry. We're putting connectivity on ships and planes and fire trucks. The first customer we ever signed was the fire department in New South Wales, 500 fire stations, getting data onto trucks that would leave the station and then be out of connectivity range for a while. The ability to resiliently operate in that environment was really huge. But getting back to your question, what would I like to see from the carrier industry? And I think it's the same thing that I've been saying for the last 15 years now. And that's a sustainable business model for this industry that quite frankly, without it, we don't have an internet, and that would be a tragedy. So I think again, an opportunity to work with the carrier industries, things we can do at the application. To make networks more data aware, application aware, to more efficiently use the network, to help you guys deliver a sustainable business model for your bottom line. I think that's going to be in everybody's interest at the end of the day.
I'm conscious that we're out of time, so whilst I would like to extend questions to the audience, I would prefer you to come over to the speakers and attack them individually. We've got 36 seconds to go, and I really want people, 15 seconds, guys, each. What's the next 18 months going to hold?
15 seconds, wow. I think a tremendous opportunity to continue this drive to connect more people to the internet. That's going to continue unabated. It's going to be life-changing for those people that we bring this great service to. The businesses that we deliver, Netflix and others, will change their lives forever. And again, that's a mission that I think we should all be very excited and proud to be a part of. So I hope that continues near-term and long-term.
One of the most interesting things that I get access to as a VP at Netflix is hearing about how we produce content and getting to be part of some of the decisions around how we produce and release content. And I know it sounds a little sacrilegious in this room, but I'm super excited about some of the content that we have coming over the next 18 months. I think the network is going to scale, and I think we're going to do a great job, and the partners that we have in the room and who are watching this are going to work with us to do that, and they're going to be proud of the stuff that we're going to put out over the wire.
Guys, I think that was really good. I really very impressed to be with you this morning. Can you respond in the customary way? I thought we had an excellent session, and there was 2 very heavy hitters. Thank you very much.
Thank you.